Welcome to Brad Kyle's Brad's Motorworks podcast, where we'll be talking about some things about BMW, some things of cars in general, and some things about car repair. I hope you find it educational, enlightening, and I hope it increases your understanding of your car. And maybe along the way we'll have some fun too. Thank you for listening, and here we go. Episode number 9, Start-Stop Engine Technology. Are we really saving anything? Well, it sounds real good. A person, common sense says if you come to a stop and the engine turns off because of start-stop engine technology, well, gosh, there's no fuel being used, so you have infinite miles to the gallon, so to speak, although, of course, you aren't actually going anywhere, and there's zero emissions from the engine. In theory, it sounds really good, and realize that, unfortunately, in today's world, the automotive engineers, they are so driven by EPA and CAFE standards, CAFE meaning Corporate Average Fuel Economy, in case you didn't know that, and EPA standards in regards to emissions, and DOT standards in regards to safety systems on the car. Those are, especially EPA and CAFE, those are their number one priorities. So it's gotten to the point where they're almost splitting hairs in regards to if they can save, 1% of fuel mileage or whatever the case may be by doing a certain thing. That's all they're looking at. They are not necessarily looking at what is the total cost of doing this. What are the consequences possibly of doing this? Their main criteria, and this is not necessarily all the engineers' fault. This is what they're basically instructed to do, okay, is fuel mileage and lower emissions. So start-stop engine technology, in a nutshell, seems like a really good idea. The issue, though, is obviously, well, I'll give you a perfect example. My own commute, by chance, is about 4.5 miles, okay? I start my car up once in the morning, and I drive 4.5 miles, and I shut it off, okay? If I had a car that had start-stop engine technology, and assuming that each stop I came to, I made a full stop, especially obviously if it's at a traffic light, okay? In other words, I would have potentially 12 times in the same 4.5 mile commute to where my engine could shut off and then restart when I went to accelerate away from the stoplight, okay? 12 times. That's in one 4.5 mile commute. So I imagine you can figure out from that over time, you're talking about a huge amount of abnormal wear on the starting system, on the starter, the battery, the charging system, because in that example of a 4.5 mile commute, the engine's being turned off 12 times and restarted 12 times to get 4.5 miles, okay? Whereas in a normal car, like the one I have, it's one time. This causes undue amount of wear and tear on, again, the starter, the battery, the charging system. And here's the clincher. It's, scientifically, there's been studies done where of all internal engine wear that could take place and does take place, 70% of it occurs during engine startup. Okay? So, obviously, the more times that car is started in its life, the more undue wear is going to occur to the internal engine components. Mostly, we're talking about internally lubricated components. Because when an engine first starts, there is a moment there, or several moments, where oil is not all the way not distributed evenly throughout the entire engine. So that means there's components of that internal engine parts that are not being properly lubricated for a short period of time. So the last thing you want to do, if 70% of all engine wear occurs at engine startup, is to start it up more often, okay? But again, the engineers are basically, their goal is to Increase fuel mileage, reduce emissions. That's all they're looking at. And in the short term, engine start-stop technology definitely takes care of that situation. But in the long term, it's actually costing more. And this is what really nobody, I mean, I can't give you any kind of a study that I've read where it said, well, this is what's really actually happening, okay? But I think, we can all logically look at the scenario once we know the facts and realize this is not a good thing. Start-stop engine technology sounds real great, but ultimately, bottom line is that the engine's going to wear out prematurely, okay? It's going to wear out quicker in fewer miles than if engine start-stop technology was not used. So the real question becomes, whatever savings we may have had, whatever increased fuel mileage we may have gotten, whatever lower emissions we may have gotten by using engine start-stop technology, the question that becomes is how much emissions are produced and how much is it costing to bring either a new or rebuilt engine to market because now you're replacing it prematurely. Or let's face it, it's quite possible, but that when that engine's worn out, that the blue book on that car is not such. Now the car is being junked, okay? It's being sold, which manufacturer could look at that and go, hey, great deal, we're selling more products, okay? But the question becomes in the big picture is how much emissions are being produced and how much money is being spent to bring a new or rebuilt engine to market or possibly even a whole different car. I would gather it's probably a losing proposition. So it really, in my mind, it's not a good way to go. And the funny part is, in regards to BMW people that I've talked with, and certainly customers that come into my shop, most of them, if their car has that, they want to have it turned off, which it can be. You can have the dealership. I think you have to sign some kind of a release that's saying that you're not disconnecting or tampering with a quote-unquote emission control device. So there are legal ways around that as far as you're not, because it's illegal to tamper with or disconnect or modify any emission control device. That's been federal law since 1967. But this is a system that it can be turned off, or you can certainly turn it off every time you start the car, which is a bit of a hassle, but it can be turned off. And frankly, everyone I've ever talked to, if their car has it, they either have already had it turned off or they want to get it turned off. They don't like it. I don't really like driving the car. I mean, you're so used to having the engine running, you come to a stop and it shuts off. It's just kind of a weird, disconcerting feeling, And the other side of it is that unless your car has electrically driven AC compressor, you're going to lose your AC. It's going to stop working. That's not a problem if you're in real short, stop and go driving. But if you're stuck on the freeway and you're barely moving, you sit for 2-3 minutes, without moving at all, you're going to have to turn off your start-stop technology and have your engine run anyway, because otherwise you're going to lose AC. And in Southern California in the summertime, that's not a good thing to have happen. So that's my take on start-stop engine technology. I think it's an interesting idea process. I could see where where the immediate goals are being met. Sounds real good, but bottom line, not a good thing for the engine or the starter or battery or charging system. It causes undue wear. And this is you, assuming you keep a car, this is you having to pay for that stuff. So hopefully that's given you some good information. You can kind of make a decision on whether or not you want to have that system in operation on your car or not. And again, if you have any comments or feedback, bkpodcast5@gmail.com. I appreciate any input. If there's a question, I will certainly try to answer it, and it might be something that eventually it becomes another podcast topic. And again, if you found this helpful, please share it with family and friends through your social media outlets. And appreciate you listening. Hope you have a great day and a great weekend. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode.
It's been an honor and a privilege to spend time with you. I hope you found this of value. Please share it with family and friends. Above all else, with all you're getting, get understanding. May God bless you and keep you, and thank you again.